Hello and welcome to another tutorial. Today I'll be showing you how to make dubstep in the style of Alix Perez. I'll make some assets from this project available in the description for free, along with the full project file which will be on my Bandcamp. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's get into it. We're at 140 BPM and I'm only using the notes F and F sharp in this project. Only utilizing a few notes is something Perez does for many of his drops, including for the track Last Rites. You may have noticed the triplet feel, something which Perez frequently utilizes in his productions. For the kick, Perez seems to favor dull or deep samples, which I've tried to emulate. I've added a fade and some pitch modulation within Simpler. Perez's kicks sound quite clean to me, so I've not used any distortion, although I did use some compression when I was designing the kick. I've added some EQ to cut out extraneous lows and muddy mids, and a low pass filter to make the kick sound deeper. The kick pattern is simple, just a kick on the first beat of the first bar, and then a kick on the second beat of the second bar, a pattern which repeats. For the rimshot, I layered a couple of rimshots and then bounced them. I've used drum bus to add character and damp down some irritating high end, an EQ to remove lows, and we have the first of many dub echoes. I've chosen triplet 8 notes and the feedback is set to 50%. The rimshot is hitting on the third beat of every bar. The shaker has some drum bus applied for similar reasons to the rimshot, and some EQ as well. It's playing a triplet pattern on 8th notes, and this is something Perez does with his hi-hats in Lifeline. The shaker is panned a little to create width. Both the rim and the shaker have reverb applied on Send A, which is this empty club preset I've used in previous videos. I've also applied a 2-step groove to the percussion to make the drums feel more dynamic and human, although since this is a triplet pattern, I've not applied very much of the timing. My interpretation of Perez's technique for making basses is that he relies on FM synthesis using basic waveforms and very heavy saturation. We're going to look at the individual channels first, so bass 1 and bass 2, and then we'll look at the bass group. For bass 1, we have 2 layers, a sine wave sub, and the main body or top patch. For the top, we have a saw wave, oscillator A, which is being FM'd by a sine wave, oscillator B. Oscillator A has been taken down 2 octaves and had its unison increased to 7. Oscillator B is a single sine wave at 0 octaves, and tweaking the unison made things feel a bit messy, so I've left the unison at 1. Remember that if you want pure FM synthesis, you must turn the level of the carrier all the way down. In this case, the carrier is oscillator B. We have a bandpass filter with the cutoff being modulated by a slow-acting LFO, LFO2, and the filter drive has been turned all the way up. Remember, basses should always be monophonic. In the effects module, we have distortion on tube mode, which is the distortion algorithm I favorite throughout this project within Serum. The filter is on post mode and set at about 3.5K to avoid any nasty high end coming through. We've got a good amount of drive, and we've used the mix knob to effectively parallel process, which I've done to an extent with all the bass Serum patches. Finally, we have a low pass filter with its cutoff being modulated by a macro, which I've automated manually. Just re-enable that and we'll listen. I've noticed this type of technique in Perez's productions, and it gives them an element of change over time, which is important given how minimal this style can be. You could also automate effects like reverb and delay or echo throughout, which is something Perez does well, although I haven't done it here. Go back to the channel. We have an amp. I've chosen the blues preset, but it's worth experimenting with the different algorithms to see what kind of results you can get. All the amps I use for the basses are on dual mode, meaning that they're stereo. I also tend to use them in parallel using the dry wet knob because it's very easy for the distortion to become too intense. I'll mess around with the algorithms and the dry wet so you can hear what I mean. Finally, we have an EQ3, removing all the sub and very low frequencies. For the sub itself, we have a pure sine wave taken down by 2 octaves, and the filter and distortion have been removed. On the channel, we have some heavy compression and mild saturation, just to add consistency and warmth. And then we have an EQ3 filtering out any of the higher frequencies. And then finally at the end of the chain, we have this auto filter. For bass 2, the top layer is composed of 2 sine waves, with oscillator A being modulated by oscillator B. Both utilize unison and detuning. Oscillator A is 2 octaves down and oscillator B is at 0 octaves, like with the previous patch. This time we have a low pass filter with less drive applied than in the previous bass. LFO2 is modulating the filter's cutoff in triplet eighth notes, so you can activate triplets by ticking this click box, and you can see it says 1/8T. You can hear a similar bass to this in Perez's track Deep 6. In the effects tab, we have distortion with an almost identical setup to the previous patch, and we have a similar filter and macro automation setup, but to a much milder extent. On the channel, we have a glue compressor, mainly because the sound was feeling a little inconsistent, and an EQ3, removing unwanted low frequencies and leaving space for that sub. For the sub, we have the pitch down sine wave again. This time I've left the low pass filter on, but I've removed the drive because the low pass filter still gives the sub a bit of an element of movement, which I wanted to retain. Then we have the compressor and warm-up lows and EQ3 identical to bass 1. For the MIDI, it's playing Fs, and we have some pitch bends applied. So the sound gets lower in pitch over time. Just bear in mind that the negative pitch bend in Serum has been set to -1 and not the default -2. Bass 1 is also playing an F, and if we play them together, we can hear how they play around one another. With both lasting 4 beats and alternating each bar. On the bass group, we have some EQ, removing very low frequencies and some muddy mids. Some bass mono to ensure the basses are mono up to 500 Hz. And this sub sidechain rack, which allows me to sidechain the lowest frequencies using the kick, something which I've covered in past videos. We also have some reverb applied on send A. Next, we have this lead bass. The sound design process is very similar to the other basses, but it's played an octave above, and there's no sub. I'll make this preset available for free in the description. If we open Serum, we can see it's quite similar to bass 1, but oscillator A also has unison applied. We have a low pass filter with its cutoff being modulated by LFO1, which is set to half a bar and is on envelope mode. You can see there's lots of drive on the filter. It's turned all the way up. And there is a lot of saturation as well using the tube distortion within Serum. On the channel, we have an amp for even more distortion. This time I've chosen the rock preset, which is more intense than the blues. Some EQ to remove low frequencies and some dubby triplet echo, this time on quarter notes. And finally, bass monoing, identical to what we have on the bass bus. I'll just take the processing off so you can listen without. This channel is being sent to the reverb. In fact, all the remaining channels I'm showing have also been sent to the reverb on send A. Next, we have this noise effect, which is the bright white within Serum with this little envelope. We've run it through an amp, EQ, another triplet echo, another amp, and then finally some EQ just to add some of the highs back. The post echo amp essentially acts like a compressor, meaning the sound carries on for longer. Just take all of these off and put them back on. Then we have this breath. Very similar idea to the previous channel, but this time I've used erosion to add noise so the breath stands out in the mix. Next, we have this laser. I used a lot of similar sounds in my When video, which covers them in more depth. We have some saturation, EQ, and echo. Again, another triplet pattern, this time with very high feedback, so the sound continues. You can see the dry wet is also turned up pretty high too. Next, We have this dub siren, which is made with a unison square wave with some pitch modulation applied, or master tuning modulation applied as it's called in Serum. The pitch is modulated in 30-second notes with a square wave shape LFO, and it's on trigger mode. The type of effects chains used in this project should be familiar to you by now. Amp, EQ, echo, triple echo again. This time we have an auto filter at 2, which kind of sweeps the sound around and then sweeps the echo around. I've also added an EQ afterwards because the sounds of the resonance on the filter can be a bit piercing. And then we have some bass monoing going on as well. If we look at the MIDI, we can see that there's pitch bend on the sample too. Just sort of pulling it down as it's being played. Both the laser and the siren have been panned to opposite sides for some stereo width. Finally, we have some old jungly vocal samples. This is a Bad Vox sample that I pitched up. It starts as an impact and ends with more of the vocal. I'll play without the processing so you can hear the difference. You may also hear that I've time stretched the sample. There's a pretty big difference before and after the processing, as you can hear. I've used an amp in this auto pan. The auto pan has had the phase changed to 0, which means that it just affects the volume. The rate is set to 1/12, meaning we have another triplet rhythm. Then we have an EQ cutting out lows and some annoying frequencies around 15 kilohertz, erosion to add some noise, and another echo. And finally, this Badman vocal, which I pitched down to make more menacing. And I used the texture algorithm for this. Again, we have an amp, an echo, and some EQ. Both of these vocal samples are from a classic jungle sample pack, which I've linked in the description. And there you have it. As I said, the full project file is available in the description on my Bandcamp. Hopefully you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one.